Hi, I'm Carla Schaefer, Speeds Designer, and I'm going to show you how to use different crimping tools and different crimp beads. The first crimp tool that we'll be going over is just the Designer Crimp Tool, and this is used with the 2x2 crimp bead. The other tool I'll be going over is the Magical Crimp Forming Tool, and it is also used with a 2x2 crimp bead, and it comes in two sizes, so it works with two different size wire. And also I'll be going over using a chain nose plier. You can use this with a 1x1 crimp tube, 2x2 crimp tube, and also the 3x3 crimp tubes, and this is just with chain nose pliers. The first tool I'm going to demonstrate is the Designer Crimp Tool, and the Designer Crimp Tool has two slots in it. And the first slot that we use is this inside slot, and then we use the outside slot. So I'm going to demonstrate how to use a 2x2 crimp tube on 0.015 49 strand beading wire. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your wire and put on your crimp tube. And then I'm going to use this jump ring. I'm going to slip the jump ring on the wire. Then I'm going to take the wire and run it back through the crimp bead. And for the first slot, you want the wire to be parallel. So like this. And we're going to put it in the first slot. And what we get is like a half moon shape, and each wire should be on one side of the half moon. And then after that, we take the tip, put it in that first slot, we mash down again, and what it does is it folds it over until it makes the crimp bead flat. And then what I also like to do, just for good measure, is use the very tip of the tool and mash it again. And that's how you use the Designer Crimp Tool. Now we're going to go over the Magical Crimp Forming Tool, and this is probably one of my favorite tools to date. And this is the tool used for the 0.014 to 0.015 beading wire, and then there's also one for 0.019, but I've also used it for the 0.018. But these are great. This is a great little tool, and what it does is it makes your crimp bead look like a round 2mm bead when you're done. So again, it uses a 2x2 tube crimp bead. You would slip it on the wire. I'm going to put it on a little end of chain here, and then run it back through the crimp bead. Okay, I'm going to put the crimp bead in the notch and mash down. And what you get then is something they call like a ravioli. You've got 4 points of the crimp bead pressed out. And so then what you do then is then you just take the crimp tool and you put those in there upright, and you squeeze again, and you open slightly, and then you squeeze it again. You're just turning the crimp bead, and what it's doing is making it round. You just do this probably about 4 times, and then now what you've got is a crimp bead that looks like a 2mm bead. Next, I'm going to show you how to flat crimp using chain nose pliers. And chain nose pliers are you may also use flat nose pliers, but chain nose have a little more narrow tip on them, and they're going to be better at getting into narrow spaces, especially when you're crimping something. Now, the 3x3 crimp tube is good for very heavy gauges, such as anything as a 0.30 for heavy beads and that sort of thing, but also when you're using multiple strands of beading wire and crimping into one end. There's a project where I've done before where I've taken 3 pieces of wire, and you're running it into, you can run it into one crimp bead, and what you would do is take the wire and run it through your jump ring. And then back through the crimp bead. So when you have 3 pieces of wire like this, it's just too much to put into a 2x2 crimp and crimp with a regular tool. So you would do is you would put them in there and then just simply flat crimp. And of course then you may hide this in a bead cone or some other large hole bead that would go over that crimp, but that's when you would use that, and also when you would flat crimp. Another use for the chain nose pliers in flat crimping is when you're doing illusion necklaces using supple max, and you can use a 2x2 tube, or you can use the little bitty guys, which is the 1x1 tubes. And I'm going to show you using the 1x1 tubes. So you would take one of the crimp beads and slip it onto the supple max, and then a bead. Well, actually, take the one crimp bead, position it where you would like, and then just simply flat crimp the bead where it flattens out. Then string on a crystal or other bead that you're doing, and you'd slip on another crimp tube, and you drop it down to the crystal where it's stopped by the other one, and then again flat crimp. So you've got that where it's stationary. And again, they're a little hard to work with, but they're very minimal into your design, so you don't really see them. And again, you would position it where you would like it to be. Flat crimp with your chain nose pliers. Add your bead, and then another crimp. And this is how you would use the chain nose pliers and the 1x1 crimp beads. Hi, I'm Carla Schaefer, Auntie's Beads Designer, and I'd like to invite you to check out the Learning Center on our website for design ideas and jewelry making projects and other Carla Cam videos.